Welcome to Defiance Daily, dispatches for the Defiant. I am your host, Miles Taylor. As always, every Wednesday of this show is a special edition, what we call the Weekly Mission Briefing. This is where we talk about what we are actually doing to fight back against abuses of power, the Trump administration's abuses of power. And as always, we have a surprise. That's why we have been calling this weekly edition Pro-Democracy Oprah. But unlike the Oprah show, we are not giving you all cars to drive away with. We are giving you actions to take to protect our country. And we don't call this the Club for Courageous Americans for nothing. Defiance.org doesn't just talk the talk. We walk the walk. 100% of the proceeds to this organization go toward protecting democracy and holding Trump accountable. And today we're going to have amazing guests joining us in just a moment. Terry Moran, the award-winning journalist and former ABC News reporter, Ruth Ben-Ghiat, the best-selling author and the thorn in the side of every living dictator and wannabe dictator, Brett Meislis, the co-host of the incredible Midas Touch podcast, and, if you can believe it, one more incredible person, Molly Jung Fast, the New York Times opinion writer and host of the Fast Politics podcast. This is going to be a stacked panel. We have a ton to talk about. And then later, you will hear from Ambassador Norm Eisen, the man who has been suing the pants off of the Trump administration. Norm has a lot of accolades on his Wikipedia profile, but suing the pants off of the Trump administration is going to form more than half of it by the time this second administration is over. And then we will tell you how you can help fight back, especially those of you who are members of Defiance.org. But before we get to all of that, we like to kick off these Wednesday episodes by talking about a Defiance win. And there was a big win this week for the Defiance in this country, and it has to do with the judge ruling that the Trump administration illegally sent National Guard troops into Los Angeles and ruling that they need to be sent home.
A federal judge has once again put a stop to the Trump administration's plans to use National Guard troops for law enforcement operations. CBS News correspondent Tom Hansen reading the order. Tom, what do you know?
Hey there, Reed. Well, this is the second time this judge, U.S. District Judge Charles Breyer, has gone toe-to-toe with the Trump administration when it comes to the use of the National Guard, specifically in Los Angeles. And he boils it down to Title 10. And I want to pull that up for us so we can give an explanation about what exactly Title 10 is when it pertains to National Guard and federal service. So basically, the criteria here, whenever the United States or any of the Commonwealths or possessions is invaded or is in danger of invasion by a foreign nation, there is a rebellion or danger of a rebellion against the authority of the government of the United States, or the president is unable with the regular forces to execute the laws of the United States to be used. Justice Breyer saying that is not the case. I want to read you a little bit of his ruling here. The founders designed our government to be a system of checks and balances. Defendants, however, make clear that the only check they want is a blank one.
I want to bring our panel into the conversation here. I will introduce again Ruth Ben-Ghiat, best-selling author, who I noted is a thorn in the side of autocrats. Ruth, it's so great to have you here, my friend. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
And then we're going to bring Brett Meislis into the conversation, the incredible co-host of the Midas Touch podcast. Brett, welcome.
It's great to be here on the Oprah episode. I love it. You get a democracy. You get a democracy. You get a. I wish right. That was what was going on right now.
I'm sure I'll get the copyright infringement lawsuit somewhere in the mail at some point if they can find me. And then we get to bring also into the conversation the indefatigable Molly Jung Fast. Molly, hi.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us, my friend. We may have another friend popping in here in a few minutes. Our producer will send me the flag if we have that person jumping in. But I want to dive into this with you guys. And Ruth, I'm going to start with you. I want to get your reaction to that news about the National Guard deployment. This is a pretty big deal because in June, I remember the time of day that Guard deployment was launched. I think you were on TV the same day as me talking about that. And initially folks were like, well, maybe it's not that bad. But, folks like you and I and a handful of others that day were saying, this is the big one. The president is sending troops into American cities. You have to understand it's not going to start with Los Angeles. And now it's fitting that first deployment is now being undone by the courts. What's your reaction to it?
Yeah, that's a really big deal because Los Angeles was the test case. And I was doing a lot of media, also wrote a New York Times op-ed saying that, really what the Trump administration couldn't stand was the sight of people coming out into the streets to help the vulnerable. And so they flooded the zone with National Guard and, very important, a Marines battalion that had served in Afghanistan and Iraq in the war on terror. And so to me, who looks at military coups and people like Pinochet who used troops on domestic populations, this was sending troops in, was telling us you were going to be the enemy from now on. And so LA was the test case. So having this undone juridically now is really significant.
Brett, I want to get your reaction to this as well, because our theme this week on this Wednesday mission briefing for defiance.org is going on legal offense and not being in this defensive crouch against the Trump administration. And this case was brought in part by folks going on legal offense and suing the Trump administration over this deployment. You all have been highlighting this fact as well, that there seems to be a growing defiance among the American people in this moment. Is it your sense that the tide is turning here? I mean, to me, I saw the story today and I felt like, yeah, another piece of good news. What's your take on that?
I think the tide is definitely turning, and I think it's important that us as citizens reflect on what's going on and also take notes of the various wins that we're seeing. I mean, there's a lot of bad to focus on, but there's also a lot of signs of hope. And I think we've seen that the American people are totally done with this regime at this point. We've seen what's been happening at these various elections over the past few weeks. We've seen what happened last night in Miami and in Georgia. I mean, they tried to gerrymander the crap out of that seat, but the Democrats still flipped a Trump plus 12 district, a district that Trump won by 12 in just 2024. That's not that long ago. And so I think Trump came in, he pretended that he had this incredible mandate to do whatever the hell he wanted. He didn't really understand what voters were telling him, which is that they were upset that prices were high. Then the key part of his policy was to raise prices further by implementing tariffs on everything and starting these ridiculous trade wars. And then he's done all this incredibly unpopular and, in my opinion, unconstitutional stuff, like sending troops on the streets in various cities. And I think that's also exposed his con game, because it's one thing to be able to lie to the American people when you're not in power or when people aren't cognizant of what is actually happening in the country in various parts of the country. But with these troop deployments, if you tell somebody that there's chaos in the streets of LA and you're sending the military to quell the chaos, and people look outside I'm in Los Angeles, people look outside their windows and they go, there's nothing wrong. Nothing's going on here. What are you doing? And then you do that in Portland and people are like, I just had a lovely day at the farmer's market here in Portland. What the hell are you doing? And then you do it in DC. I think people quickly catch up to your BS and they realize that it's all for show, that you're just trying to show the strength. But in that strength, what we're actually seeing right there is weakness.
That's absolutely right. And I mean, in the spirit, Brett, of the tide turning and people pushing back, Molly, I don't want to go too far forward into the future, but you in the past few days have started talking about something that I think sets a very important marker out there. And you should tell us about Project 2029, because the day that I saw this, I was sitting around thinking, one of our groups or orgs or a group of folks need to launch something called the undo list, where we literally just list out all the things that need to be undone on day one. And then I saw you were doing this and I thought, okay, well, Molly's off to the races. Tell us about Project 2029 and why this in and of itself is an act of defiance.
So look, there is, again, I think it's important to go backwards before we go forwards on this, which is Project 2025 was a Heritage Foundation's mandate for leadership. The idea here is that you have a kind of wish list that you want. And again, I think it was pretty smart of them, because remember, Trump struggles with focus. And so they had a sort of plan.
You don't say.
Wanted, and they got a lot of it, because Trumpism is, and I don't need to tell you this, largely not ideological, right? It's kleptocracy, it's it's sort of throwing things in the wall and see what sticks. So the idea here is like, how do you prevent what happened last time? How do you not have a one-term Democratic president who just serves as a placeholder? How do you do something to undo the corruption that's happened during Trumpism and to make sure it doesn't happen again? And we're talking about broad, sweeping, anti-corruption legislation a la Richard Nixon. And that, a la post-Richard Nixon legislation. And that's what we need to see, is we need to see whoever gets in there next, the Democratic president, the Democratic Congress, the Democratic Senate, they need to be laser focused on passing laws that stop corruption. And by the way, that starts with ending congressional stock trading. That starts, like, anti-corruption legislation can start in Congress. And we must demand, not in a nonpartisan way, that our electeds hold themselves to a moral standard that is the only way we get out of Trumpism.
Yeah, well, I think it's an extraordinary undertaking. And Molly, it's one of those things that every single day I think we are seeing more things that need to be added to the list you all are putting together of what needs to be undone and how to do it. And today we saw yet another one of those. In fact, we saw multiple of those. But there's this story that broke that the Trump administration has announced it's going to be seeking the social media profiles and histories of foreign tourists before they come to the United States. 5 years of your social media history are going to be requested by the U.S. government before you come here. Now, I could do a whole 5 shows on that and talk about how we grappled with this in the first Trump administration and pushed back to keep it from becoming a reality. But apparently there are folks there now who thought this was a good idea and have leaned into Stephen Miller and Donald Trump's desire to put this in place. And now it's coming to fruition. So I'm going to play this clip really quickly just to lead us into it. And then, Ruth, I want to ask you about it on the back end.
The Trump administration is continuing its effort to tighten the U.S. border. The Department of Homeland Security says it plans to require visa-free tourists from dozens of countries to provide a 5-year social media history in order to enter the country. CBS News immigration and politics reporter Camilo Montoya Galvez joins us live with reporting on this announcement. Camilo, how will this process actually work?
Good morning, Mugo. Citizens of more than 40 countries enrolled in the visa waiver program can typically come here to the U.S. for up to 90 days for tourism or business travel. That list of countries includes many European nations and U.S. allies like Australia, Japan, and New Zealand. And while their citizens typically do not need visas to travel to the U.S., they still need to submit an application online using a system known as ESTA before entering the country. The Trump administration, Mugo, is now proposing to overhaul that system, mainly to require applicants from these countries to share additional information. That includes, as you noted, their social media history for the past 5 years, also emails that they have used for the past 10 years, and the personal information of direct family members, including their phone numbers. The Trump administration, Mugo, says the changes are designed to comply with an executive order that the president says will make it easier for the U.S. to deny entry to people who may pose a threat to national security or public safety. But you are already seeing, Mugo, some concerns out there that the proposed changes could negatively impact tourism here to the U.S.
Ruth, there's a long history of autocratic regimes putting in place ideological litmus tests to be able to look into people's histories before they let them in. Are we waltzing right into that?
Oh, absolutely. And this actually, by targeting foreign tourists, this goes beyond what autocrats like Erdogan have, where he's got these things called insult suits, and 150,000 Turkish people from ranging from fruit vendors to the former Miss Turkey, they have been prosecuted for just like one social media post. But those are Turks. Now, what we're doing is saying that foreign people can't come in if they're critics of the regime. And so my take on this is, and we've already seen this with, scientific researchers, medical researchers, professors being stopped at the border. He wants to isolate the United States and cut the United States off from networks of knowledge exchange with democracies. at the same time that they're trying to have like, a new kind of autocratic order. And allowing, and Trump at the same time is saying, oh, we'd like to increase the number of Chinese students coming to 600,000 from 250,000. And so we're going to see that, the goal is to kind of cut the United States off from any kind of fruitful intercultural exchange, because that's what autocrats do when they're in the middle of a national purity campaign.
Molly, I want to jump to you because I know we have you for a limited time. Do you think that Americans are waking up to how insidious this all is and how much work is going to go into things like Project 2029, things like that mega bill and beyond that we need? I think even the comparison to Richard Nixon probably doesn't do it justice, because I think it was pretty clean. That's the sort of legislation they needed to implement after Nixon. But this is going to be so massive what needs to be done to undo all of these things.
Yeah, and I don't know that you'll undo it. I think you'll create a legal framework to make it so that, look, a lot of what we have right now is Trump. We, for such a long time, American leaders were sort of constrained by norms and not laws. So you had presidents do things not because it was illegal, but because the norms dictated you did such things. Trump didn't care about norms. And so a lot of the things he's done, well, tearing down the East Wing may not be illegal, though it may also be illegal. It's against norms. And so what's going to have to happen now is that there's going to have to be a real discussion about making things illegal, right? Number one, like tearing down the East Wing seems like an obvious one, but even, broader kind of taking gifts, that kind of thing. But I also think you're going to have the real question is going to be, sort of like, we're going to need Democrats in office who are willing to really act in a way we've seen, and I'm sure you feel this way. We've seen for a long time, Democrats bring a stuffed animal to a knife fight, right? They've been unable to push back in a way that Republicans have. Well, they're going to have to really have a kind of come to Jesus moment here, because so many of the emergency powers that were allowed to stay on since 9/11, so much of the, the sort of things that were not fixed, that the ways in which Democrats were not, they didn't repeal zombie laws like the Comstock Act, which is why we find this Republican, we see Republicans trying to take away the mailing of contraception. These are things, we're going to need to see a Democratic Party that really does go back to brass tacks and starts looking at laws and how to, repeal zombie laws, put in place real anti-corruption legislation. It's going to be a huge job.
I'm not going to be able to shake the image of Democrats walking around with stuffed animals now. So I want to ask you, because I know we have to let you go soon, Molly. Are the Democrats still carrying around stuffed animals, or have some of them started to trade those in for brass knuckles?
I think there's some of them have, and we've seen Chris Murphy. We've seen some Democrats push back, but leadership has had a really tough time. And there was just this really excellent reporting from Punchbowl. It was not even reporting; they did a sort of survey of all the staffers, and the staffers found that Chuck Schumer had only 6%. They had the least faith in Chuck Schumer, and that's the guy who's running the Senate. So as much as we're seeing some really good pushback, I think leadership is struggling still.
Brett and Ruth, can I get your take on that as well? Because, I think what Molly notes is just a really powerful point, is people feel incredibly frustrated that Democratic leaders are not meeting the moment. And, I think about Schumer, I think about Hakeem Jeffries, and then I compare them to who she just mentioned, Chris Murphy. I mean, Chris Murphy's out there every day. He's a very serious guy, and he's saying, look, y'all, the democracy itself is fundamentally threatened. This is massive. I mean, he says it just very plainly. He doesn't build it under Washington speak and pretend, tomorrow's another day of bipartisan fighting and we'll sort things out at the end of the day. I mean, it's existential in his view. What's your take? Let me go to you first, Brett, and then and to you, Ruth.
Yeah, I think I think a leadership shakeup would be good. I think the people are demanding it, and I think especially in the Senate, we've seen a leadership hole there. But I think we've seen Democrats sort of get their fight back. I think after the election, there was a long period of time where it felt like, what do these people stand for? They really lost their mojo, and you started to see the party try to like figure out, where do we go from here? And I think they're still in that process, but I think they've at least now figured out a little bit Donald Trump's weaknesses and how to actually begin to message and how to fight back, and how to focus on issues that the American people care about, and do it effectively. I think there are a lot of people, Chris Murphy is one of them, who are doing that. And I think also the shutdown battle, we saw that now. Of course, there were the 8 who ultimately folded in that battle, but I thought they stood strong and they made this healthcare issue a very important issue, front and center for folks, in a way where people wouldn't have focused on that if not for that strategic move for the Democrats. So I think they certainly deserve some credit there. And I think it's upon the American people also to continue to speak out and to demand more from our politicians. I don't care if you have a D behind your name or an R behind your name or an I behind your name. These people should be representing the American people, and the American people do not like what they're seeing right now. I mean, there's a small percentage of people right now who do, but we see Trump's approval rating collapsing further and further by the day. And people are looking for right now, who are going to be the leaders of the future? Who is going to be the person who steps up, or the people who step up and have our back? And I think that's good to have that conversation out in the open. I think it's good to have debate. I think it's good to be able to disagree with one another on what that direction is. But I think you see a demand right now for new leadership in the Democratic Party. But I think you also see leaders emerging, which I think is gives me some optimism for this moment. And I think sometimes in times of darkness, sometimes you need that in order to get these moments of light and to actually kind of put that pressure on the party to kind of reshape itself for the future. I think we're kind of in the middle of that right now.
Ruth, are they meeting the moment?
Yeah, I agree with Brett. I think what we need is, and this connects to what Molly was saying, I've been writing since February that we're going to need we've been living through this moral collapse in America, and we're going to need a values forward politics. And we know from polling also that young people care less about specific party affiliations or even issues. They care about values. And that's why, for example, Mom Donnie was able to get former Trump voters. People are more flexible, but they care about values. And they want somebody who's going to be fighting for them. And we do see people emerging in the Democratic Party all over the country. And I think the more successes, such as what happened in Miami, and there's undeniable kind of string of successes now, the American people are making their will known. This will hopefully embolden the more progressive or more expert messengers among Democrats to think they don't have to be so cautious. They don't have to be so beholden to old elites, because this is a world. Think about the mayor's race in New York City, where I am. You had Cuomo and you had Adams, and these are people who, in some respects, are very Trumpian. Adams is very tied to Erdogan. Cuomo, 13 women, was judged for sexual harassment. These are not people who you want to represent you. You need something different. And I think that message is getting through. And it is true, like Brett said, in times of crisis is when I think there's a space for experimentation. There's a space for being bold. And I'm hoping that will be borne out in the future, because that's what we need.
I take your point on the moral collapse. I mean, as recently as last night, we saw an indication of it as Trump went on stage in Pennsylvania and made these derisive comments about foreign countries, used that term shithole countries that for years he had claimed he never said, and White House staff said he never said. And I wrote about this morning on defiance.news. If people want to go read it, I tell the story of one of those Oval Office meetings where Trump did say these things. And I've been talking about that for a number of years because that's who he is in private, except the difference between what happened last night and what happened 7 years ago is 7 years ago, It was a huge controversy, and African nations, sent their ambassadors to go meet with the U.S. ambassadors to complain. There was fallout. Lawmakers issued statements of condemnation. We didn't see anything like that last night. And because Donald Trump knows people are morally exhausted by this moment, and he feels like he can get away with it. And so he's going out there and he's saying these things now. He's not even denying them. And, we're also seeing that with his policies. And one of those that I want to ask you both about is on birthright citizenship. We don't have to get into the policy nuances of it, but we found out last week that the Supreme Court is going to hear this massive case. And those arguments are probably going to be in the spring, but around birthright citizenship, which is protected in the Constitution, that you can come here, and if your child is born here, they are an American citizen. But, our friend Norm Eisen, who we're going to talk to in a little bit, as he says, Donald Trump does not like black and brown babies, and so he doesn't want birthright citizenship anymore. And that may sound hyperbolic, but it's not. I mean, I can tell you from having sat in the room with the man, he wanted to shut off immigration from countries like Ethiopia and Somalia and Haiti. He would list those off, and then he would say, where I want people from is Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway, Sweden. Okay, you hear those two buckets of countries, you can't come to any other conclusion than, oh, okay, he clearly doesn't want people from black and brown countries, and he wants people who are white with blonde hair. I mean, I would walk out of those Oval Office meetings and say you can't come to any other conclusion than that, the way he's bucketing these countries. And now he comes in and he says, via executive order, I'm going to reverse this constitutional right to birthright citizenship. So that's going in front of the court. But Brett, this is something that, and maybe our producer can put this up on the screen, a majority of Americans seem to think this is crazy, is they support birthright citizenship. It's in the Constitution. If you come here, you're living here, you have a child here, they're part of the club. They're an American. They didn't get to choose where they were when they were born. And if they're born here, they're one of us. This seems to be so fundamental. And to what Ruth was just saying about morality, how does it get more central than that? Is the choice this unborn child doesn't get to make about where they become a citizen?
He's become so brazen with his attacks on the United States Constitution and with his attacks on the American people. And I think that's because he feels invincible, because he got these immunity rulings from the Supreme Court, because the Republican Party has completely abdicated their responsibility as being a check on power. They just let Donald Trump do whatever they want. And I think that's one of the reasons we're also seeing so many of these Republican members of Congress right now saying that they're going to retire or resign, because they're like, why am I even here? What am I doing just to be a rubber stamp to Donald Trump? But to your point, I mean, I think about, the 2019, the impeachment of Donald Trump over the Ukraine phone call. And that was, you had a whistleblower, Vindman, who came forward, and we all learned there was a secret phone. There was a phone call held, and Donald Trump did a quid pro quo scheme to try to get Ukraine to investigate the Bidens. And we read the transcripts and we heard all this stuff. And we were like, wow, that's crazy, and there was a whole impeachment and there was this whole firestorm about it. Now, Donald Trump basically posts things like that on his social media, like every single day. Like the other day, he's like, yeah, I tried to bribe Congressman Cuellar and he didn't switch parties. I thought we had a deal, man. I thought you were going to switch parties, dude. Don't you know the quid pro quo? And you're like, oh, so he's just very brazen about it. He just does not.
Oh, I might have lost Brett here for a second.
He never.
There we go.
I think I lost internet for a second. I'm back. So you're seeing him now take that philosophy to the extreme, and you're seeing him just trying to do everything that he possibly can, throw everything at the wall, see what sticks, let the Supreme Court handle it. And you notice in times when his presidency is in crisis, and I think Ruth could probably speak to this much better than I can, but he goes back to the same move I've noticed. So affordability, right? It's the big issue right now. Prices are skyrocketing. His presidency is in peril, and the Republicans are in peril because of this issue. So last night, he holds an affordability rally where he calls affordability a hoax. And then he spends all of his time saying exactly what you said, saying the real problem are the Somalians. The real problem are the people from these shithole countries. That's the real problem. Those are the people driving up your prices. And to me, that's an authoritarian tactic right there to blame these groups for all of your problems. Oh, the reason why housing is so expensive, it's not because of a limited housing supply or these institutional firms buying up housing. It's because of the brown and black people who are coming into this country. They're stealing your housing. Blame them. Don't blame me. Don't blame the billionaires. And so you see that strategy being employed, and he's going to keep pushing and pushing and pushing. He's going to frankly do whatever he can do, especially in the realm of pushing racist ideas, because he knows that's like the one thing that his base right now is clinging on to as everything around them falls apart. So he's relying on these racist tactics. And I think he just has this, let's throw everything at the wall. We'll see what happens. The Supreme Court at the end of the day will decide what to do. But I am just going to make it known to my base that I hate these people and they hate these people also. And that's what will connect us all.
Well, you know, I noticed something in the background there. I don't know if I've seen any commentators talking about this, but, you know, there were a number of people of other ethnicities standing behind Trump as he was saying that. Someone had a sign that said Persians for Trump. Yes. There were a couple of other individuals that clearly, were not white, Americans and who may themselves or may have had family members immigrate to this country. I thought it was, there had to have been far more people in front of him who fit those criteria, and how awkward that moment must have been for them to realize how much of a naked bigot this guy really was if they didn't realize
at the same time
already. Yeah.
One of the things I've noticed is that those folks never think he's talking about them.
That's
he's
right.
talking about the bad ones, right? And I saw so many clips, especially clips of Latino voters in Florida, for example, around the time of the election, where they asked him about immigration and Trump's policies. And Trump made no mystery of what his immigration policy was going to be, and that he wanted to send ICE onto the streets and federalize things and send people out. But when they were asked about it, he said, yeah, but he only wants to go after the criminals. I'm doing things the right way. He only wants to go after the criminals. I think one of the reasons we're seeing the shift in places like Miami, like we saw last night, and around the country, is because they realize, no, it's not just the criminals. In fact, the criminals are maybe the smallest bucket of folks that Donald Trump is going after. He's going after their families. You're having people who are citizens, have green cards, whatever it is, they're being harassed on the street. We've become a show your papers country right now, where you are basically presumed guilty until you could prove your innocence or prove your citizenship in this case. And now you're seeing people harassed across the country, but people never think it's going to be them until it is them. And then they have that oh crap moment. But while Donald Trump is riling them up, I'm not totally sure they get it until they see the cousin, the brother, the mother, somebody get pulled aside and thrown into jail or questioned about their ethnicity or their citizenship or whatever it is.
Yeah, Ruth?
Yeah, and there's a famous poem by someone who lived under Nazism saying, first they were coming for this group and I wasn't part of this group, so I didn't care. And then they were coming for that group and I still wasn't, part of that group and I didn't care. And by the time they came for me, there was no one left, right? So this is the classic denial that we see throughout history, that autocrats, when they're in trouble, they they double down on their racism, on their numbers of targets. Sometimes they also want to go to war to, quote, unify the country. And these are well-known tactics that usually fall back against, they don't work for the autocrat in the long run, but we're seeing them happen now. And I am hopeful that more and more people will wake up and see Trump and his administration for what they are.
Well, that's the note that we'll end the panel on, and I think you're right, Ruth. The hundreds of people we've got right now listening in across Substack and other platforms are that audience. They are the people who are awake to this, and they want to help other people get out of that classic denial that that happens in autocracies. Ruth Ben-Ghiat, Brett Meislis, thank you both for joining us. We appreciate everything you do and your courage in this fight.
Thank you.
Thank you, friends. I'm going to be thinking about that one for a while. Let me bring in my colleague, Xander Schultz, co-founder of Defiance.org. Xander, would love to just get your reactions to what you heard in that panel. I mean, our theme this week is going on legal offense against Trump. It doesn't get less important any week. I mean, it's more and more important that we challenge these abuses of power. But but damn, that list is getting long.
Yeah, the quote from Brett, which was we've become a show your papers country.
Yeah.
I think oftentimes we're asking where are we on kind of the authoritarian scale or journey or whatnot. That one is pretty clear to me. If you're in a country that is asking people to show their papers constantly, you're in an authoritarian regime. That felt almost binary, that, we are there. Maybe not in all the ways, but in a pretty important way. I'm happy Brett said that. And, the nice thing about our group in this effort, to your point, is this is a group of people who are awake, want to do things, and we're here to do things. And this week every week's been great. We've talked to awesome leaders all over, but the group we're bringing up here, I'm so excited to highlight them and their leader. Look, courts are one of two checks on the executive branch. A legal strategy has become more important because we are not confident in that other check being Congress at the moment. And so a legal strategy has become extra important. And the Trump regime strategy is muzzle velocity. They are trying to overwhelm us, as your guest mentioned, with illegal act after illegal act after illegal act, hoping that we can't keep up with it, we can't fight, and we can't win. And so when you take all that into account, a robust legal infrastructure is necessary to fight and win. And we're extremely lucky. And I think, Miles, part of the motivation of us starting this in the first place is we knew these people before we started Defiance. Extremely lucky that we have some of the greatest knights. If you're going to Game of Thrones and you're selecting your knight from combat, we have some of the greatest knights in the history of this country ready to fight, that are fighting and are on a winning streak right now. And that was, in our conversation with the leader earlier that we had, it was great to hear how often they're winning. But I want to pause there and Mercedes, if you want to play the clip that's highlighting the organization that we are supporting.
Yeah, and just before we get to that, so in case folks didn't catch that earlier, Democracy Defenders Fund is the organization we're going to be talking about today. The organization this week that is headlining our legal offense effort. So Mercedes, let's hit that clip.
They told us what they want to do to the American people, to us.
We will absolutely target you, go after you, if you are targeting anyone with hate speech.
Beneath the veil of virtue, they tell us rules for thee, but not for me.
But if your political rhetoric encourages violence against our law enforcement, you can go straight to hell and you have no place in the political conversation.
They falsely label healthy democratic dissent and nonprofits they don't like as the kind of hate their allies perpetuate.
Involuntary lethal injection or something, just kill them.
The point, to silence us, to shut us up.
We should use some of these dangerous cities as training grounds for our military.
Their crackdown on immigration, it's a favor for shareholders of private prisons. They are disappearing U.S. citizens too.
They put me in the cell. I'm naked in like a hospital dress.
In their quest to divide us, they're taking us all down.
Democrats are getting killed on the shutdown because we're closing up programs that are Democrat programs that we were opposed, and they're never going to come back.
Well, most of us. But they don't and won't have the last word. Authoritarianism wins only if we let them bully us into silence.
Now, I said earlier that Norm Eisen, who leads Democracy Defenders Fund, has been suing the pants off of the Trump administration. In fact, there were a number of topics we talked about already today that the organization is involved in. I mentioned birthright citizenship. They're one of the central parties helping to bring that lawsuit against the Trump administration, Democracy Defenders Fund. Yesterday, we talked on this program about the Trump administration's illegal boat strikes. Who led that call for a probe yesterday? Norm Eisen and his group, Democracy Defenders Fund. So members of Defiance.org and our supporters, you can see why these are the folks this week we are very, very excited to get get behind. Now, Norm is a very busy guy, and he was dealing with one of these key lawsuits today, so he wasn't able to join us here live, but Xander and I had a chance to catch up with him earlier and to talk about how we are going to partner with that organization. Take a look. We are joined by the incredible Norm Eisen. Now, Norm, I have to say up front, I have to confess that I have a personal dog in this fight, that being the fight that you lead, which is that you were one of the first people to reach out to me after I was targeted by the president to basically say, hey, don't worry. We have a whole operation set up for things like this. We are prepared to respond to Donald Trump's revenge machine. Tell us about that. And I want to know when you kind of got the idea to say, we need to marshal an army of people to get ready, especially lawyers, to get ready for this revenge presidency.
Well, our organization, and we're so thrilled to be supported by Defiance, is the Democracy Defenders Fund. And we are now more than 50 lawyers and communicators fighting authoritarianism in the court of law and in the court of public opinion. And all of those big litigation cases that you hear about, whether it's civil or baseless criminal investigations or anything else, we are a part of that, Miles. And we got the idea on January 7, 2021. The organization was built by the toughest folks who, with me, fought back against Donald Trump's effort to take over the 2020 election. And on January 7th, after the horror of January 6th, but also democracy pushing back, we said, this is not going away. We need to be ready. And that's why what Donald Trump has been doing has not been a surprise to us. We were ready. And we were very honored when his assault on you began, as it has happened with so many thousands of others. Thousands. I picked up the phone and said, how can we help?
Well, and that's how I got to know what you guys are doing. And it goes far beyond stepping up to defend people who have been targets of Trump's revenge. You all are doing what is the theme of the day for us here, the theme of the week. You're going on legal offense against these abuses of power. And I know, Xander, you and I have been talking about all the ways and the reasons that's important, but maybe I'll throw it to you, because this is the thing I think a lot of our members have been asking us is, what can we do to go on offense?
Yeah, I'll give you some examples of how we've gone on offense. We didn't just sit there and wait for the illegitimate Donald Trump prosecutors. He's put his cronies in to prosecutorial offices to go after the bad folks. We went after them, Miles and Xander. We filed the very first case against Alina Habba, and guess what? She's gone now. We got a series of courts to hold that she was not legitimately appointed. And not only that, that same theory, we filed briefs in the prosecutions by Lindsay Halligan, another bogus Trump U.S. attorney, filed briefs building on that win in the Habba case in New Jersey, over in Virginia, where Comey and James were being prosecuted, supported their lawyers. Guess what? Those cases were thrown out. So that's an example of going on offense. We've represented the men who were wrongly abducted Venezuelans sent to the notorious CICOT prison in El Salvador. We filed the very first Federal Tort Claims Act case, the regulatory complaint, to clear their names on behalf of somebody who's not a gang member. And we're doing similar things, going on offense across the country. Could give you dozens of examples because defense is important, but you have to play both sides of the ball if you're going to defeat authoritarianism.
Yeah, it's so you're basically our version of muzzle velocity, finally pointed in that direction. It's so good to hear. all of your
Peace,
successes.
always peaceful and lawful. Court of law, court of public opinion.
Right. You named some victories that you've recently had, huge victories. What is ahead for you, Norm? What are you focused on in the coming months?
Well, we have another one of our very important successes. We went on offense against Doge, Elon Musk, but we're continuing to pursue those cases, our legal campaign and that of our partners in the coalition. Democracy Defenders Fund is still standing. Our litigation is still going. Doge is no more. Now we want to push those last remnants of the illegal Doge philosophy out of the government. We're pushing forward on those cases. Elon Musk, we have litigation against him. We want to hold people personally accountable for the wrongdoing that they're undertaking. We have several big cases at the Supreme Court where we think we're going to win. That includes the birthright citizenship case. Donald Trump doesn't get to choose which babies born here are citizens. He doesn't like the brown and black ones. That's not up to him. The Constitution said all babies born here are citizens. That case was just accepted at the Supreme Court. We've won at every level. We're going to win there. And Xander, we have 237 and counting legal cases and matters. And I'm looking forward to adding dozens more as we come to the end of the first year anniversary, like a fireworks show where they save the big boom for the end. We're going to be in court of law, court of public opinion with dozens more cases in the weeks and months ahead.
Well, Norm, I have to tell you. Oh, go ahead, Xander.
I was just going to say his optimism is so nice to hear. Like,
That's what I was
the tracks you
say.
have and the optimism is so nice to hear.
Xander, it's not optimism. And I'm going to tell you
it's based on evidence.
why.
Clearly, you're winning all over the place. Which is fantastic.
When I was an ambassador, now that, you could have called defiance dissidents.
Yeah.
I was trained by the great dissidents who brought down the worst authoritarianism, the communist regime. One of them was Václav Havel, the great dissident Czech playwright who became the president. And I once said to him, I was optimistic. He said, Norman, I'm not optimistic. Nobody knows the future, but I'm hopeful because, as you say, Xander, the evidence. So I would say I'm hopeful because there's so much evidence, both Democracy Defenders Fund, but all of our partners pushing and succeeding and winning in court in hundreds of cases.
Well, Norma, I'll agree with Xander. It is infectious. I know you and I have been on set for a number of different TV programs where during break, the hosts have said the exact same thing to you about your energy in this moment. And that is
and
so
usually
needed.
They add, what are you smoking?
Yeah, that's
I
right.
Want some.
That's right. And he picks up a cup of water and shows them, it's just fueled by nature.
Seltzer.
So
always seltzer. It's a seltzer fueled resistance.
Norma,
and caffeine.
That's
have
right.
my coffee.
A little bit of that.
Well, I've got to say, Norm, you are you really do exemplify what defiance should look like in this moment, and that's one of the reasons why the Defiance.org community, which we call a Club for Courageous Americans, wanted to make a small contribution to what you all are doing, which is hopefully the start of a relationship where we can partner with you all as you're going and taking on these cases and pushing back against these abuses of power. So, Xander, do you want to share what that gift is from Defiance.org?
Actually, Miles, I have someone better than us coming on to present this grant. So, Mercedes, can you bring on our friend?
Hi, my name is Katie King from Gresham, Oregon, and I am a proud Defiance Club member. Today, on behalf of thousands of Defiance Club members, I'm proud to share that we are collectively awarding Democracy Defenders a $20,000 grant. Thank you for the work you do. We stand with you as you fight against tyranny.
Wow. That's spectacular.
We're so honored to be supporting you. We're so happy you exist and you're out there fighting and winning like you're winning. And it's just really, we're here to be your ally throughout this battle.
Yeah, and like I said, consider this a starting point. And also, we know that your time is limited today, Norm, but we will share with our members after this conversation the ways they can also personally get involved with the fight, because that's what we do every week. Is we not only provide some support to those groups, but we also give our members, tens of thousands of people, the opportunity to actually go get personally involved. And I can tell you, there is no effort I think they would be more excited by than getting involved with what you all are doing on the front lines.
Hey, you defiant ones, that's $20,000. It will do so much good in our cases, but it's also 20,000 points of hope. So I thank each and every one of you. Miles, I want to thank you, Xander, as representatives of this wonderful Defiance community that I'm so proud to be a part of. And have me back. I'm going to run off and work on one of those 237 legal cases and matters. I'm so pleased and proud to be a part of this effort, and for all of us at Democracy Defenders Fund to be a beneficiary of the effort.
Ambassador Norm Eisen, go win those cases. Thank you, my friend. We appreciate it. We'll stay in close touch. And if you're not following him on social media, follow Norm Eisen and The Contrarian on Substack and on social media platforms. Norm, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, everybody.
Oh, that was a good one. That was a good one. And again, that was earlier today, folks. As you heard from Norm, 237 legal matters and cases. So he's a busy guy. But Xander, we get to say to members of defiance.org, you are helping to fund those now. Pro-democracy Oprah strikes again. What do you think, man?
I said this after we got off the call with Norm. The way Norm carries himself is so much more sustainable than the feeling of outrage. And sometimes I think as we're doing this work, honestly, it's the best I feel these meetings are the best I feel. Doing something is the best I feel, but sometimes it feels like because of the gravity of it and the seriousness of it, you have to kind of display that type of emotion. And seeing someone as reputable as Norm carry himself the way he does, and you can see that it gives him the energy he needs to get up and take on those 230 some odd cases on his docket, none of them being small. We're talking about the Venezuelan boat strikes, defending birthright citizenship, et cetera. And so anyway, it felt like, honestly, it gave me some permission to carry more joy with me as we do the work we're doing, because it does feel good to fight back, and it definitely feels good to fight back and win. They're just doing awesome, awesome work.
Yeah, and look, I hope defiance.org members will go out there and brag about this today and this week. You are helping to fund the fight. This is really exciting. This is a great organization. And by the way, if in future weeks you want to be the one to announce the grant that our club is giving to a partner organization or the action, some weeks it might be different. It might not just be a grant, although in this case, we know that those important cases against the Trump administration need, key backing. But send us a DM. Send us a direct message on Substack. Just go to our members page at www. Do you have to even say that anymore? Defiance.news. Just go to defiance.news. And if you haven't set up your account there, just make sure to use the same email address you joined as a defiance.org member on, and send us a direct message and let us know you would like to volunteer to give the grant in future weeks. We'd love to have you do it.
Yeah, shout out to Mercedes with that idea. It's way better than you or I, and really makes it feel like we're a club when different members are coming on, sharing that news.
And more where that came from. I'll tease that, we had a number of conversations today with some just really exciting organizations in response to what our members shared at the last monthly members meeting last week. And one of those, I got to tell you, Xander, like my wheels have been turning since this afternoon. We had the coolest conversation, and we cannot wait to tell you what we have underway.
100%. It's taking every fiber of my being to not talk about it.
Hands down, the most impactful thing we will have done so far. And Yeah, and probably the most defiant action that we have cooked up. And second that, Mercedes, our producer, is a rock star. So if you're watching this on Substack, hit the heart button to show Mercedes a little bit of appreciation. I'm going to call an audible here. We have a guest that I'm very excited to bring in. And I'll take responsibility for this because I screwed up the communications with our friend Terry Moran, who was supposed to join us on the panel earlier. And poor Terry and the ever reliable Terry got on Substack to join us through that platform instead of the software plugin that we have people joined through. And so, he was just sitting there. And thank God that Terry doesn't do billable hours because we would owe him a ton of money for sitting there waiting. The incredible award-winning journalist, Terry Moran, welcome to Defiance Daily.
Thank you, Miles. And I have to say, it's my cluelessness still about all this. I think one of the things that happens when you're like a network news guy, like I was for so long, is that you can't do anything for yourself. There's always like producers. And I was just sitting there on the wrong platform. This is clearly the place to be, and I'm glad I'm here.
But that's how you know that Terry's the real deal. Is he's like not so dialed into how like these new media connections work. He's like, I'm a journalist through and through. Terry, I'm thrilled to have you. There's a bunch of different things. We spoke earlier with Molly Jung Fast and Ruth Ben-Ghiat and Brett Meislis of the Midas Touch Network, and then we had Norm Eisen on the program. And of course, I think you might have caught us, awarding a grant to their organization, and we're very excited about that. But our big theme this week in Defiance is going on legal offense against the abuses of power we are seeing in Washington. And just before you jumped on, I saw breaking news that the Trump administration, is trying to convince the International Criminal Court to rewrite its founding documents to promise not to prosecute Donald Trump or any of his lieutenants. And I got to say that's as much detail as I have, but it doesn't sound guiltier than that. If you're asking the criminal court, hey, please don't prosecute me and my people, seems to be an admission that you're guilty of things. I just want to get your reaction to that. Again, probably not knowing the details as well, but that was very striking to me.
Well, he's going to want to, if he's around after his term ends or whatever, he's going to want to travel, and it is highly unlikely, given these boat strikes and other actions, that prosecutors at the International Criminal Court wouldn't be interested in having him in the dock, because it is clear that there's no international law certainly behind these boat strikes, and it looks like there's not much American law either. I think one of the people who's an unexpected hero in this on the law is Rand Paul, Senator Rand Paul, who I think articulates the illegality of this under American law as well as anybody. Now, it is a little ironic that Trump and his minions, they're all concerned about the International Criminal Court. He's done nothing but badmouth it since it has been established, and he mocks it. But it shows, as you're saying, that standing up with whatever you have, and the International Criminal Court depends on the nations of the world acceding to its jurisdiction and cooperating in its efforts to bring international war criminals and others to justice. And I think Trump's worried about it.
Terry, you're gonna think I'm blowing smoke when I say this, and I'm not. There are very few journalists out there today who capture the arc of history when they're also talking about the news of the day and contextualize it. And one of the greats at doing that in the modern era was Tom Brokaw. I'll never forget the coverage of 9/11 and that day. If you were watching the Today Show with Katie Couric and Matt Lauer, it felt so propulsive. It was terrifying, all of the things. But then later in the day, when Tom Brokaw comes on, you have this moment of understanding what this means in the context of history. And you are one of those people, my friend. You're very, very good at taking the things we see in the moment and helping us understand how that connects to the larger American story. And in that vein, I want to ask you, as we've been talking about the legal excesses of the Trump administration, we are now getting into genuinely uncharted territory. And I mean, by the numbers, the Trump administration, at least according to the rulings of federal judges, has been ruled to have done illegal or unconstitutional things more than any other president in American history. And we're just in the first year of that second term. I mean, the volume is extraordinary. And I just want to get your thoughts on that. And how are we going to look back at that? And how will we help Americans understand the gravity of this moment?
I think that what you just said, this unprecedented nature, illegal, found by courts and clearly beyond the bounds of law in so many ways, the illegal nature of so much of Trump's actions is the best way to capture what he is out to do. He is trying to change, not just breaking laws, he wants to change the entire structure of our government and democracy and concentrate power in the president's hands, in his personal hands, in a way that is unaccountable. And he doesn't believe in the laws that can bound them. He has this intoxication with the power that, let's face it, the Supreme Court has granted the president of the United States, first in Trump versus United States last year, and soon more coming this year. We are at a very dangerous point. No other president would have thought of doing things that we now, it's like they're third tier, fourth tier issues. He's put American soldiers on the streets of American cities. No president would have thought to do that unless there was mass unrest and violence. And above and beyond that, wouldn't have done it without the permission or the request of their local authorities. That's only been done a couple of times in the history of this country, when there were students being killed at the University of Minnesota, when state officials refused to enforce federal law. And both President Eisenhower at Little Rock and then President John F. Kennedy at Mississippi had to use military power to enforce federal law. Federal law is being enforced everywhere in this country. No problem at all. Not a whisper of a problem. There are a couple of people here and there out protesting ICE. They're more than a couple, but they aren't doing anything illegal. So Trump is using these powers in ways that no president has. The illegality is the politics. It is the politics of authoritarianism. And we haven't seen anything like that. Even Andy Jackson, his famous Chief Justice Marshall has his decision. Now let's see him enforce it, which he may not have said about, I'm just going to pick up all the American Indians out of Southeast and put them in Oklahoma. That wasn't a systematic effort to destroy the structure of government, as Justice Sonia Sotomayor said in court this week, that the efforts by the Trump administration to break down all the boundaries around whether or not the president can fire everyone in the executive branch, regardless of the laws that Congress passed to restrict it, is part of an effort to, quoting Sotomayor, destroy the structure of our government. That's what the takeaway is, and why what Defiance and everybody who's standing up, why it matters so much. We're standing up for our country.
Xander, I felt like you wanted to jump in there. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I'm just curious. Like we have this frog boiling in the pot slowly problem. When you say illegality is the purpose, it's the strategy and the normalization of things that would have felt insane, and if you understand history, are insane and unprecedented. I wonder, when you study history, the times where publics have been shaken awake, what mattered? When there were these attempts to boil the frog and it didn't work, the public woke up and organized because they thought this was a step too far. If there's any pattern recognition around that we should be incorporating in how we think about leading defiance and our peers that are leading resistance movements.
Yeah, that's a great question. It is unprecedented, certainly this scale of it. There have been presidents who've taken hold of the presidency with great energy and aggressiveness. And changed our government as a result, right? But they were trying to put some law around it, and they were responding to crises, genuine crises. One thinks of, Franklin Roosevelt, but he lost at the Supreme Court and took his losses, and he certainly wasn't doing anything like Trump was. He was desperately trying to get the country's economy back on its feet. Lincoln fighting the Civil War, suspended habeas corpus, and then even the Emancipation Proclamation. They're it remains a question about whether it was within the scope of presidential power to save the country. This isn't about that at all. The only historic example that I can think of that's anything like Trump is the governor of Louisiana, Huey Long, in the 1930s, who did a lot of the same kind of things, concentrated power in his own hands, knocked down all the boundaries, all the ignored laws, militarized the state capitol, punished opponents with all kinds of uses of state power that no one had ever thought of before. And that's as close as we got. And that was the 1930s when fascism was in the air.
Sure. Yeah, I remember FDR visited Italy and said Mussolini reminded him of Huey Long. And Huey has some quotes like "I am the law" when he was running around. We want to stay in partnership with you and keep learning from you, because it's important we apply those lessons from history as we try to. We've got tens of thousands with us now at Defiance. We're growing quick, but we need to build that out into a mass movement quickly, and history often shows us the way.
Quickly is the word too, because it feels great to stand up. What's really stopped him? The troops are on the streets of the cities. ICE is behaving the way it does. They're expanding it, the domestic law enforcement to a force larger than the United States Marine Corps. They're wearing masks. Not a lot has really changed. The only thing that really does stop Trump, of course, is the American people, who in their wisdom don't get too riled up at at everything that's new or different or even bad. But when they move, they're unstoppable. And that's really part of what we all do is we're trying to do journalism, do advocacy, stand up for our country in ways just by telling the truth and persuade people with the truth that they need, that it's time to acknowledge what's happening and to stand up and be counted on where you're going to be on it.
Terry, that's a timely thing to say, because for those who hang with us until the end of the program, we're going to be talking about some of the specific actions they can take this week on the theme of going on legal offense against the Trump administration's abuses of power. So hang with us for that. Xander and I will walk you through it. But Terry, I want to ask you another question here. You mentioned Sotomayor's comments about the administration trying to destroy the structure of government. It's sort of evocative to me of something I talked about a good bit after the first Trump administration, which was one of his cabinet secretaries. I think I can now say who. It was Defense Secretary Jim Mattis at the time. We had left, I think we were in a meeting in the White House Situation Room, and we left, and he talked about how, his concern is that Trump himself represented a threat to the fabric of our republic. I mean, this is someone who is a sitting cabinet member to the president, who is now seen what this man is capable of in the first term, the things he wants to do that a lot of people like Mattis prevented from happening, the things we are now seeing happen, like getting close to invoking the Insurrection Act and deploying those troops into American cities. And it was clear to him, this was now 7 or 8 years ago, that the man was a threat to the fabric of our republic. And now we are seeing that manifest. And as you note, most of those guardrails are gone. We are now at what Thomas Jefferson said was the ultimate check, the people themselves. In your estimation, has any living American, are they aware of a time period where they faced this level of responsibility for the continuation of the republic?
Well, the Civil War, certainly. And that was a grave crisis. We could have come out a very different country, two countries, or a dictatorship in one country. Lincoln said the country will remain all slave or all free. And there was no guarantee that in either instance, after such trauma, a decent person would be running the show. And he was. And then Grant came in. And while not a great president necessarily, he was also a decent man personally. And this is an indecent man. And I think the other time, I do remember I was, what was I, 14 years old when Richard Nixon resigned.
I thought you were going to say during the Civil War.
No, not that old. Although it does help. Though the one thing that if you're awake and you've lived a fair number of years, you're supposed to know a little something, and I hope I do. And I remember the feeling of the president being caught red-handed in what, in the scale of Trump, is a kind of it wasn't minor crime. He was using the powers of the government to go after his enemies, and covering it up. He ordered the CIA to tell the Justice Department to stop investigating the crimes that he himself was involved in. That's Trumpian. And it was scary. It was a darkness over the country. And he resigned, something we would never see Trump do. And his vice president was very different. Gerald R. Ford came in, and there was that decency. He stabilized the country. Cost him his re-election when he decided the best thing for the country was to pardon Nixon. But just that there was that Midwestern solidity that he had, a calmness. He'd been in Washington a long time, and that was a good thing because people recognized and respected him. That got us out. And then the country changed directions. They went with Jimmy Carter. This is different. Trump, it's interesting. For all that he wraps himself in the flag, he's un-American. We've never had a political figure like him, except for maybe Huey Long. And he's much more like a European or South American, or, you pick your country and pick your era.
Right.
Strong men rose to the top and tried to take over the society. That's what we're looking at.
Just look at who he likes to hang out with. It's very obvious who he's mimicking, who he enjoys, the style of leadership he wants to have. 100%.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that is the only check at this point is going to be the people. And I trust the people. I do. I mean, look, for example, here's one example to give everybody hope that we haven't stopped being Americans. Aside from these off-year elections, Mamdani and Mikey Sherrill and Abigail Spanberger and others since. I remember that night I thought, okay, well, America is still America-ing. They're the great mass of people. They're the ballast in the ship of state. And even before those elections, before Donald Trump, the day he took office, Americans' attitudes about immigration were that we had to have less of it, and we have too much of it, and there should be less of it. And that was really a first. Americans have generally welcomed immigrants. Within a few months, that curve, which was we should have less, is completely reversed. And people are expressing to pollsters and at the polls that this thuggishness on the streets of our neighborhoods, where the people who are our neighbors and the parents of our school, of our kids' friends at school, are getting snatched, where women are getting torn from their children. That's not who we are. Is it enough to do the trick? Well, it's only been a few months, and you see that curve flip-flop. They'll do it. They'll do the right thing.
Powerful words, Terry. I'll say that notion that that's not who we are, I think, is a resonant one, and you are starting to see people defy the notion that that is who we are. And we will continue to count on you, my friend, to be one of those reminders to us about who we are. So, Terry Moran, wonderful to have you on the program.
Great to be here. You guys are doing amazing work.
We apologize for crossing wires, but we'd love to have you back in the future. And thank you for all you do, my friend.
You too. Thank you, guys.
I got to say, Xander, I want to toot our horn, but hell of a conversation today across the program. I am as fired up this week as I've been since we started to get the defiance.org effort rolling, and real things are happening, very real things, including so much outreach from our members about the actions that they are taking, in addition to what the club is able to do to support some of these amazing groups and pushing back against these abuses of power. Talk to us a little bit, about this week, my friend, what people can do individually if they're able to go above and beyond to personally get involved more in this week's mission.
Yeah, it's going to be a great week ahead. I want to say, a couple of things just reacting to Terry before we get into that. One, It felt extremely validating, him talking about the power that lies in people. I feel like what we are beginning to build here together, I'm talking to all the club members, is something that has the ability to fight at all levels, right? We can work with groups like Democracy Defenders to protect checks and balances, and we can build out our base to be a meaningful group that organizes the American people. And Terry talked a lot about history. Usually you see collective action in moments of pain, right? When you respond to kind of these overreaches or whatnot, when you talk about American history, the draft in Vietnam and all the losses we were taking there is a great example, but historically across the spectrum, that affordability crisis that Trump was speaking on yesterday, that is starting to drive some of that action. It's part of the reason that Congress is finding a backbone. It's part of the reason these guys are losing in courts. It's part of the reason his popularity is slipping, is as his disastrous policies come into effect and he keeps overstepping, and that results in real pain. And we talked yesterday about that. America's starting to be ostracized. The British not sharing intelligence with us, certain types of intelligence with us anymore. That's going to show up in different ways throughout society and hurt us. The tariffs, the impact, that pain is not good. I don't want Americans to experience it, but it is starting to collectively help us find the courage and the time and the energy to fight back en masse against these folks. And it is giving me a lot of hope. I'm starting to have some pattern recognitions around the times groups like us have contributed to victories against regimes like this. And so I'm just so grateful Terry jumped on with us and shared what he shared. And I feel very validated by his words and his lessons he was sharing.
Yeah. I want to pick up on one thing quickly that you said on the reputation side, not just the British sharing intelligence. I mean, that news that was breaking as we hopped on about how the administration is going to be requiring 5 years of your social media history to come to the United States, that is going to make people not want to come here. They are right. And we have years more of this administration implementing policies like that. People don't want to come to the United States anymore. And then adding further insult to injury, the administration is targeting the very people who are proudest to be here. Some people who risked their lives and their children's lives to go on one of the most dangerous journeys on the earth to reach the United States. Who's more excited to be an American than that person? You don't want to deport those people. You want to make them your damn brand ambassadors. Those should be the brand ambassadors for America. And we're sending them out of the country and we're shutting the doors to people who want to be here. That has long-term repercussions. We can do what Molly Jung Fast said at the top of the program, Project 2029 style, and undo all of these things over time, but you can't undo that damage permanently. And, that's why I think it's all the more important for Defiance.org members and people writ large to be saying, this is not who we are. We will outlast this. This is one man's vision for America. He is not a mirror of this society and who we want to be. I think that's really important to be declaring that. And I think you're right, Xander, is more and more people seem to be mobilized by that message.
Yeah, right on. And look, we're here to make that action easy. So let me get into the action of the week. We are, as mentioned, supporting Norm and Democracy Defenders. Amongst many, many things, they're also leaders in the fight to end the illegal killings that are taking place in the Caribbean or off the coast of Venezuela. And so their ask for us this week is to write our Congresspeople, urging them to call for the Trump administration to turn over the full tapes of the event and the legal memo clearing the strike. As you see in the news, this issue is really starting to crescendo. And so we are going to be part of that push to get a big win here against the regime. As always, you don't have to memorize this. We're going to be sending out this info on our Substack in the follow-up to this meeting. And we're also rolling out a new tool that makes it incredibly easy to call your congressperson. So we're excited to share that as well, along with those instructions. And the other thing to note on actions, look, we heard a lot of your feedback. It's great to write your Congresspeople. It's great to be in support of these national movements. But you've also said that you want to take action locally. And so starting next week, we're going to launch local actions. We're going to have a local action of the week. This is things that will be more engaging. Oftentimes, there'll be community involved, things like becoming an immigration court watcher, attending a Know Your Rights training, joining a local community organizing group, subscribing to a local newspaper, finding and supporting a mutual aid network, attending a city council meeting, et cetera, things to get out. These are the types of things authoritarian movements rely on weakening. And these are the types of local actions that strengthen social and civic infrastructure. And so we're really excited to roll that out next week. And
yeah, I'm glad.
Miles, any note
Xander,
there before I move forward?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the sort of one-click call your congressman. You know, this is going to come up a lot because this is a pressure point, and sometimes it's going to be calling them. Sometimes it's going to be other clever activations to get their attention. We know how to get their attention. We're going to get their attention. And I don't want folks to eye roll and think, you know, that never works. It did work. It worked. Think about the Epstein files. The Trump administration wanted that story to die at the start of this year and not talk about it ever again. But you all and the American people said no. You put extraordinary pressure on Congress, and members of Congress felt like we can't let this go. And a huge bipartisan rebuke of the administration, Congress demanded the files. Now, that story's not over yet, but in the same vein, Democracy Defenders is saying we need to tell them also on these illegal boat strikes to hand over the files. And Xander's right. That pressure is going to ratchet up. Engaging in that outreach is going to make a difference. So until we get that sort of one-click functionality up and running to make it really easy for you to reach out to your member of Congress, like Xander said, we'll spell that out tomorrow in detail when we send the follow-up to this meeting. The only other thing I wrote down here, Xander, is just that I'm very proud to be doing this with you, my friend. This is the right thing right now, is to be in this fight full time. So just great to be doing with it. Great to be doing it with you, brother.
Yeah, man, it's an honor. Obviously, you're almost the logo for resistance, I feel like, at this point, man. So if I can be a partner to you and a partner to all of our club members, it really is an honor building this. And I don't know what I'd do if we didn't have this momentum around this thing, to be honest. Like, it feels good to be in this fight in something that is growing and has traction and is impactful. We are getting wins on the board already, and we're 6 weeks into this. So love you, man. I really appreciate you as well. Let me close out real quick to let our club members know what's ahead. Next week, we are learning how we can help troops defy illegal orders. That's Wednesday, 12/17. And then the following week, this is before we break for the holidays, we moved the club meeting up to that Monday, so 12/22. We're talking about the need for mutual aid networks to both resist Trump's punitive policies. We all know what's going on with SNAP and healthcare, et cetera, but also to survive his affordability crisis that he's put on Americans through his tariffs and a number of other policies. So that's what's coming up before our Christmas break. It's going to be great. We've got great groups, great leaders to talk about, and thank you for being with us.
Yeah, and if you're that members meeting you mentioned just before just after the holidays, there'll be another members meeting. For folks who are not members of defiance.org, go check out the website. I think you know what it is, defiance.org. And if you become a member of the organization, your member fees go towards these things like we did today, supporting pro-democracy organizations in the fight. Every week, a different action to fight back against Donald Trump's abuses of power. You can also sign up on Substack. If you just go to defiance.news, and if you become a subscriber there, you are automatically a member of defiance.org and a part of those members-only meetings and all of the other things that come with it. So we're very grateful for those folks who are fueling the fight and a part of this. And Xander, I'm very excited to announce those things that we're going to announce next week. Next week might be the organization's biggest week so far. There's some very provocative and important things that we're going to try to take on to have an impact on that issue that Xander mentioned. So excited about that and very, very grateful for the courage that we are seeing out there in this community. And again, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Give us ideas for the show, give us ideas for the club and actions to take. Send us those direct messages, especially if you want to be the person that we feature next week in announcing that support to a great organization. So that's all I've got from my end. Anything else from yours?
Thank you, friends. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next week.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, gang.